Okay, let's dive right into this. When we think of the Battle of Britain, our minds usually jump straight to those cinematic images, right? Lone, heroic pilots locked in these intense, swirling dogfights high up in the clouds. And hey, it's a powerful image, but in today's explainer, we're going to see that as really just scratching the surface. This wasn't just a jousting match of airborne knights. Actually, scratch that. It was more like a massive, desperately fast, highly interconnected machine racing against the clock. So today, we're going to break down how this vast, hidden network of radar stations, ground crews, observers, and everyday civilians pulled together to literally save a nation.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this defense, we have to look at the absolute nightmare of a situation in the summer of 1940. France has completely fallen. British forces miraculously managed to escape total destruction at Dunkirk, sure, but they had to leave almost all of their heavy equipment behind on the beaches. Now the German army is standing right across the English Channel. And they aren't just taking in the view. They are actively gearing up for a full-scale invasion of Britain. They called it Operation Sea Lion. The threat is literally right on their doorstep.
But Germany faced a massive strategic roadblock. You see, an invasion fleet packed to the brim with troops and tanks simply could not cross the English Channel as long as the Royal Air Force, the RAF, was still up there ready to rain fire on those ships. The water was a barrier, absolutely, but the sky was the ultimate key. Before a single German soldier could set boot on a British beach, the Luftwaffe had to achieve one absolute prerequisite: total control of the skies. So the opening act of this invasion had to be fought in the air. Which brings us to a massive, mind-bending, logistical problem. Imagine you're facing this overwhelming threat coming across the water. Wave after wave of enemy bombers are heading straight for your cities and airfields. How on earth do you defend yourself? I mean, you can't just keep all your planes circling in the air 24/7. You'd burn through all your fuel and completely exhaust your pilots in just a few days. You have to be able to anticipate the attacks. When you're playing defense on this scale, every single second of warning counts.
And the answer to that problem was Britain's secret weapon, chain home radar. Now, fun fact for you, this technology actually started as a pre-war British experiment trying to build a literal radio death ray. Yeah, no joke. The death ray was a total flop, but researchers noticed, hey, this thing successfully bounces radio signals off of aircraft. So they took that tech and scattered these massive radar stations all along the coast. They essentially acted as the eyes of Britain, detecting threats forming all the way over the channel before they even got close. Instead of blindly patrolling the massive skies, Britain could literally see the invisible. Talk about a game changer.
And this brilliantly illustrates how that information actually flowed. It was heavily organized into what was called the dowding system. It's basically a three-step dance. Step 1. That coastal radar detects the incoming threat. Step 2, that data is instantly flashed to a centralized command center. Inside, mostly female WAF personnel, that's the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, were frantically moving markers across these massive map tables, plotting the bomber's exact course. Step 3, RAF commanders look at that map and launch their interceptors. The entire goal was absolute efficiency. They needed to send the exact right aircraft to the exact right place at the exact right time.
Once that launch order was barked out, the defense relied on two legendary aircraft, the Hawker Hurricane and the Supermarine Spitfire. And they actually worked together in brilliant tandem. The faster, super agile Spitfires were usually sent way up high to tangle with the deadly German fighter escorts. Meanwhile, the rugged, dependable Hurricanes tore right into the massive, heavy bomber formations below. But remember that radar warning we talked about? It only bought them the tiniest window of time. From the second that alarm sounded, pilots had literally just minutes to scramble, take off, climb to altitude, spot the enemy, and attack.
As that grueling summer of 1940 dragged on, the battle dialed up to terrifying levels. The Luftwaffe relentlessly pounded targets across southern England, specifically trying to blind and shatter that very defense system we just talked about. RAF airfields were being heavily cratered by explosives. Vital fighter stations were obliterated. In some cases, British aircraft were being blown to pieces before their wheels even left the grass. The pressure was just unimaginable. We're talking about young pilots pushed to their absolute physical and mental breaking points, flying 3, 4, sometimes 5 deadly combat sorties every single day.
Which really forces us to ask a terrifying question. What actually happens if the whole system just collapses? The danger here was off the charts. If Britain lost too many experienced pilots or ran out of operational aircraft, that entire beautiful defense network would just shatter into pieces. Because think about it, without the fighters, the radar is practically useless. You can see them coming, but you can't stop them. Every single operational squadron mattered. Every extra hour of early warning was absolutely crucial. For the guys strapped into those cockpits, there was no time to sit around and debate grand strategy. Their job was brutal and simple. Find the enemy, attack, and somehow make it back home in one piece.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is who else was in the fight. The RAF was definitely not doing this alone. Think about what actually happens when a Spitfire lands after a brutal, twisting dogfight. It's smoking, it's out of ammo, it needs immediate, desperate attention. Exhausted, grease-stained ground crews and mechanics worked relentlessly, literally around the clock. They were frantically pumping fuel, jamming ammunition into the wing guns, and patching up bullet holes with canvas just so those pilots could get right back into the sky. Without these unsung heroes sweating it out on the tarmac, the entire mighty RAF would have been permanently grounded in a matter of days. But then, the entire dynamic of the battle abruptly changed. Frustrated by the RAF's resilience, the German bombing campaign shifted its focus away from the battered airfields and started deliberately targeting British cities, with London taking the brunt of it. This horrific phase became known as the Blitz. Night after grueling night, the skies filled with bombers bringing catastrophic destruction straight to civilian doorsteps. Entire city blocks burned, and thousands of families were forced to huddle deep underground in subway stations and dark basements just to survive the night. Yet, incredibly, even as their own neighborhoods were being reduced to rubble, the ground defenses stubbornly kept fighting back.
And why this shift matters so much to our story is that the Battle of Britain was no longer just a tactical, tit-for-tat contest between rival airplanes. It had evolved into this grueling existential struggle over Britain's fundamental ability to continue fighting the war at all. The whole point of bombing the cities was to break the spirit of the people and completely cripple the nation's infrastructure. So this sprawling defense network was suddenly tasked with something much bigger than just shooting down planes. They had to keep the very heart of the country beating while living under constant, daily bombardment.
And their stubborn, absolute refusal to break led us to one incredibly pivotal day, September 17, 1940. Because the RAF somehow remained operational, and because those British radar and command networks flat-out refused to collapse, the German Luftwaffe suffered mounting, completely unsustainable losses. They simply could not achieve that vital air superiority they desperately needed. And so on this exact date, Adolf Hitler officially threw in the towel on Operation Sea Lion. The invasion was postponed indefinitely. Britain had survived the most immediate, terrifying threat of the entire war.
Now, you've likely heard Winston Churchill's famous, soaring speech praising the few. And let's be clear, those brave RAF pilots who flew into those chaotic skies absolutely earned every bit of that honor. Many flew until they were physically ill from exhaustion, and tragically, a lot of them didn't come back. But when we look closely at how this whole thing actually worked, we kind of have to recontextualize that famous phrase. The very survival of the few up in the air was entirely dependent on a massive, complex, unseen machine functioning flawlessly right beneath them.
So the crucial point is this. This epic battle was won by a colossal team effort. It wasn't just lone knights jousting in the sky. No way. It was the radar operators staring at flickering screens for hours. It was the WAF controllers calmly routing information while bombs dropped outside. It was the mechanics turning wrenches in the pitch dark. The observers tracking planes with nothing but binoculars, the anti-aircraft crews manning the heavy guns, and of course, the everyday civilians who just kept the country's factories and cities functioning while the world literally exploded around them. It was one giant, interconnected network holding the line.
The legacy of this massive collective effort literally changed the course of history. Now, the Battle of Britain didn't end the Second World War, and it certainly didn't destroy Nazi Germany on its own, but what it did do was prevent a 1940 invasion. Because that intricate network held together, Britain remained in the fight. It survived to serve as this massive, vital launching pad for the Allies, making it possible, years later, for forces to finally cross back over to continental Europe and ultimately win the war.
You know, it's so easy to look back now and think Britain's survival was just inevitable. But for weeks, the outcome hovered on an absolute knife's edge. History was literally altered by an invisible, heavily interconnected network of completely unsung heroes who just woke up and kept doing their jobs under the most extraordinary pressure imaginable. And that leaves me with this thought for you to take away today. If a hidden system like that could save an entire nation in 1940, what unseen, interconnected systems, run by thousands of unsung people, are quietly keeping our modern world functioning right now? It really changes how you look at the complex systems all around us, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what's beneath the surface.